So right now we've kind of set up a stormy looking scene, and let's put everything we've learned so far together into like just a quick animation, just to double check everything's working as expected. So first of all, we've downloaded the Twinmotion Boats pack. This is free, so you can get this from the Unreal Engine Marketplace and follow along perfectly. And we're going to be using, I guess, this boat, because it's nice and big and has a fairly unusual shape, and it's a bit of a almost like a worst case scenario, but yeah, it's nothing too difficult to get it to work properly. So a couple of things that we need to start doing, first of all, is select the boat and make sure it generates overlap events. Great. And next, let's give it the actor tag on. And when it comes to our water simulation, let's make sure that the boat is the star of the show. So camera tracker, we're gonna switch that to track actor, and under track actor, hit the little eyedropper and select the boat. And you could see that, well, our boat is now sailboat. That's the one that Waterline is going to track. And now we can just do like a really simple test, see if everything's working fine. And we could see that our boat is generating waves. It's not movable though, so we can't really move it. So let's do that, simulate again, and we could pick it up and move it, and things are looking as expected. Now there's a bit of an issue just because, well, it's a boat, so it's much larger than our traditional setup for our third-person character. So we're gonna increase the simulation range to something like 50, so it's nice and big for the boat. Simulation height, we may want to slightly increase that to 5, but 2 might be fine. Normal textile size, we're not really gonna mess with this. Simulation resolution, 512 should be good for this case. And simulation texture resolution, let's bump that to 2K. Simulation speed, let's leave that at 60. And velocity trigger is fine. We're using actor tag on, so this really isn't playing a value. So this value isn't really doing anything for us right now. Screen space simulation will be pointless because we'll be rendering this out in the sequencer. And we're not going to use tag simulation. And for foam, we're just going to add that a little bit later on. But yeah, let's see if everything is working as expected right now. And yeah, we've set our dampening here to 0.99 in this case. So our waves are traveling a bit further, and they're slightly bigger. And yeah, this is a slightly older version of the Ocean Actor, so the dampening setting is hard-coded, but we've basically changed it to a value that should resemble 0.995. So without further ado, I guess we could start adding in dynamic foam. So we're just going to enable it here, and we're going to say all dynamic foam. We're not going to really mess with anything else. But next up, just to improve the quality of the simulation that's being done, let's grab our boat and make some of the materials two-sided. Now you could see that our boat is made up of many elements with lots of instances. And the ones that we really care about are those that have to do with the hull. And we've kind of already singled these out over here. And you could let's just make them all red for the moment so you could see what we're changing. So the front section, the top section isn't really too important in this case, but we found out that this sort of middle area is sometimes intersecting the water. And yeah, let's have that affect trails as well. Next up, we have our end section. And last but not least, our middle section. Now this model is quite complex. It has like lots of pieces to it. Generally, this is a bit of a worst case scenario, but it's nothing too difficult. All you need to do is just type 2 over here and material property override, two-sided, and enable this for all of these. So let's just quickly do that. And we are good. Let's make sure we save them all. So now when we hit simulate, our boats, well, you could see now it's generating foam as well. but it's generally being captured much better. Now the foam is a little bit of an overkill. Now the way that I'm kind of having the boat move and the camera following is I'm basically, when I move this, I also hold down the shift key. And this is how we can get the boat moving and everything working as expected. Whoops, went underwater there for a minute. And the height of the waves might be a bit too much in this case. So let's get back to our boat and maybe lower this to 3.5, something in between what we had previously. And let's start messing with the dynamic foam. Now the white cap power over here at 1 may have been a bit too strong, so let's try a value of 0.5. We can hit play. And it's still quite strong now. This is how the foam is being generated. So let's actually leave it at 1, and the dampening, we're going to leave that at 0.5. And much like with our other simulation values, we could further tweak them after the fact in our ocean material. So for example, let's go to our normal settings and the sim normal power. Let's increase that to something like -1. In this case, going lower will make the normal waves of the simulation a bit stronger. And just so it's a bit more clear what's happening, let's disable the dynamic foam. So now they're they're much harsher and maybe a little too harsh in this case. So let's just mess with the values a little bit more. So maybe 0.5. So as we move the boat, we can get a nice idea of the sort of wake that it's making. And yeah, this is looking pretty good at the moment. Something else worth adjusting is maybe in this case we can have the boat sit slightly lower. Let's see what we get when we do that. So yeah, this is pretty good. Let's drop that back down to 0. I think that was a good value to have it. Sim normal sharpen, this gives it an extra pinch to the normals. Keep that as close to 1 as possible. We're not really going to mess with this too much because it really is just to really fine tune the appearance of the ocean. So once we're happy with the foam settings in our ocean actor, we can continue fine tuning the shape from the water material itself. So when we scroll down in our water surface material down to foam, we're going to find a whole section dedicated to dynamic foam. So let's move the boat a little bit and see what some of these parameters do. So moving the boat, you could see that now we're leaving a bit of a noise trail, and that is called churn. Now we have settings for churn color, which can control how it appears, churn tile, which is the tile of the churn texture, roughness, and strength, how visible it is. So let's just move our boat a little bit more. We can create a bit more foam, and we can lower it to increase its visibility. And there is also a bit of a normal texture that also overrides the waves. Right now the tiling is quite tiny, but we can increase it a little bit. So yeah, in this current case, I'd say we don't really need churn. It's like an additional set of optional shaders, so we can just outright disable it. So now that we've decided not to use the dynamic foam churn, let's see what some of the other parameters do. So let's hit simulate and start moving the boat around. So right off the bat, you could see that we leave a bit of an intensive trail and then a slightly darker trail afterwards. That secondary comes from the shape. Now we could change it to 0, have it, something like 1 or -1. And then our boat is going to be leaving a full-on consistent trail without any sort of foam mask. And then foam power, of course, just controls the strength of the overall foam that's being simulated. So perhaps we could go with something like 0.5 and shape of 0.5. And let's see how this goes. We aren't leaving any shape at all, so maybe the power strength is a little too hard. So minus 0.5. Then increase this to 1. Now it's just a matter of really finding the the right values. So we're gonna play around with these and see what works. So ultimately, when it comes to dynamic foam distortion and power and the settings, this is pretty much what we came up with. And to show you a quick demonstration, let's just now start the simulation and move our ship. And something that's really cool is that if we move our boat a lot, we can pause the simulation and we could zoom in and really see what some of these values do. So for example, how the power shape subtracts from the overall churn that's being generated by our boat. So our value of around 0.6 was good because sometimes the trail can be a bit too much. And then we also have foam distortion, which kind of warps the shape of the foam around the simulation, and increasing it can produce some kind of funky results, but in motion, value of 0.1 is generally pretty good. So without further ado, I'd say we're quite ready to render out a little bit of animation with our boat. So now that we're happy with the way our waterline actor is set up and our boat, well, let's start rendering out our animation. So for the purpose of this, we're going to drop in a level sequence, just call it test 1. Drop it in our map, and we're basically going to add a basic animation to our boat. So let's track our sailboat. So we're going to track its transform over here, and we're just going to advance time a little bit. Let's make this into a short 10-second animation just for demonstration purposes. Like so, and basically, let's see, in 10 seconds, we want our, our boat to be here. So let's see what's that doing in terms of speed. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. So now, because this is an editor, we haven't hit simulate. We're not seeing any waves being generated. So let's hit simulate and play our sequencer. And we're getting some pretty much what we expected. Some really nice wakes, a little bit of foam, and that's it. Our boat comes stationary. So let's just add a bit of a, let's just wrap up our animation by adding in a camera.
Get our sailboat, find where its start point is, so yeah, this is pretty good. Maybe mess with the focal length a little bit.
Cool, and I'd say we're pretty much ready to get our camera in here as well. Everything's looking pretty good, and yeah, all that's left to do is pretty much render it out. So as one final step, let's just go over how we created the thumbnail. Now for our basis, we just used the large buoyancy map. We added a level sequencer, much like in the previous section. And what it looks like is, well, we've pretty much keyed our big boat. Now, we did change one thing on our big boat. Well, it's big because also you could see the scale of a standard Unreal cube. So this is, I believe, meter by meter by meter. And well, this is many, many meters big now. A fairly small size ship. But what we did was go to the boat model, and simulate physics is disabled, just so we're not really going to be using physics for this. It's going to be animated via the sequencer. And for the boat, we've given it the actor tag on. And that's pretty much all we've changed from the default blueprint. Next up, we've keyed our animation so that it travels for a long time, and it actually travels quite far in this case. So all the way there and back. Next up, for our ocean, we've been using one of our newer parameters called wind contribution, which if we just go to live ocean, this is what kind of makes the waves all stretched out. Because we're using Unreal Engine 5.1, it's nice to use this console command, temporal super resolution, projection flickering 0. And you can see that this kind of made our waves a bit sharper. Removes a little bit of a blurriness to things. So back to our ocean, we've increased the wind speed to 50. Wind contribution is 20, so this is why our waves look all stretched out. For example, if we go to our standard value of like 2, you see this is pretty much what the map looks like by default. So we'll just stretch them out so they're more drawn out massive swells. Next up, we have amplitude. I believe we've decreased that or increased that a little bit from the default value. I believe that used to be 0.1, but yeah, just give it a bit of an edge. Wave height 40, wave choppiness 30. I believe these were quite high on this map by default, and wave tile is 15,000. So this is pretty much what we're doing. In terms of, whoops, I changed something. In terms of our simulation, we're using a simulation height of 5 because this is a big boat. Our range is 150, so quite large. Normal textile size, we've set it to 78. Simulation capture resolution is 512. Simulation texture resolution 1K. Simulation speed 60. Velocity trigger doesn't matter, much like in our last case. These values also don't. Dynamic foam is set to enabled, and all dynamic foam because we have only one thing and we want it to generate foam. We haven't really messed with these at all. And as our camera tracker, track actor, and track actor is our boat. So let's just quickly go over the ocean material. So the main thing that we have changed is our small normals. These are the extra detail waves that we here use. Small normals is enabled, and we're using this texture, water 5 normal texture. Now, if you hit this little folder here, Waterline actually comes with a bunch of pre-made tileable wave textures, so feel free to use whichever one of these you want. And yeah, let's just slowly scroll down so you could have a good idea of the settings that we've used in case you want to recreate the scene. Pretty much all standard except for possibly our foam settings, where we've changed the foam tile, some of the foam strengths, and of course the dynamic foam, which we have set the dynamic foam power shape to negative 0.25. The distortion is 0.002. Power is 0.5. Use foam, and we have disabled the dynamic foam churn. So that's pretty much it. And as to how we created a thumbnail, because of our setup, we're pretty much good to hit simulate. Let's go full screen. And in our sequencer, we're ready to hit play. And let's just drag that out of the way. And we can more or less follow the boat as it creates this really nice wake. So you can see the different waves here, underwater effects, everything. So as we've increased the range, you could see that the foam stays around for quite a bit. Maybe we can increase it a little bit more, but if this is, for example, like a video game or something where the camera would be fairly close like this sort of range is fine. Maybe it dies off a little too quickly, but again, these are all things that you can tweak to your liking. If you want to take a particularly nice screenshot, what we can do is just pause the simulation. Now our sequence is actually still playing, so we're just gonna have to simply drag the boat back into its place, move it out of the way, and here we have our beautiful simulated waves with the foam, the churn, and everything. Well, I suppose we got rid of the churn, but yeah, if you want to take some really nice shots with this sort of simulation, this is how you can do it. So thank you for sticking with us for so long. We still have a couple of more tutorials planned up ahead, and yeah, now it's your turn to go make awesome things.